This video is about how to care for Flaming Katy houseplants, otherwise known as Kalanchoe Blossfeldiana. Kalanchoe Blossfeldiana is a fantastic flowering succulent plant that provides beautiful blooms for months at a time over the winter and the springtime. It's really popular because it does flower for so long and provides a splash of colour in your home over the winter time when your options for flowering houseplants are more limited. We're going to discuss all the aspects of how to care for this plant so you can keep it looking brilliant and beautiful for as long as possible. If you like this video, please consider subscribing to the channel and liking the video. And if you want to read more about Flaming Katy houseplants, I've written an accompanying article over on my website, smartgardenguide.com. I'll place a link to that article in the description below. So Flaming Katy, basically you want to put it in bright indirect light in your home somewhere, ideally an east or a west facing window. Doesn't tend to like too much direct sunlight, so a south facing window or more than 1 to 2 hours of direct sunlight per day, and it can start to wilt. The leaves can get scorched and sunburned, so try to keep it in bright but indirect sunlight, and that's best for it. It wants a well draining soil, so it doesn't like its roots to be constantly in water, waterlogged. The roots need good aeration, so you want a well draining soil, so that after it's been watered, the roots have taken up as much water as they want. The remaining water doesn't sit about and cause problems. And one of the main problems with these Flaming Katy houseplants, and with a lot of houseplants in general, is that people do tend to overwater them. They do get fungal diseases and root rot, and that leads to the death of a lot of houseplants. So err on the side of underwatering your Flaming Katy and you'll not go too far wrong. A good way to tell actually if your Flaming Katy houseplant does need watered is actually just to feel the soil. So forget about the plant, feel the soil. If you can feel down and the top half of the soil is dry, then you know your plant needs watered. If you touch the soil and the first inch or two are still damp, it doesn't need watered. There's plenty of water in the pot, so leave it another day or two and check again. In terms of temperature, Flaming Katy will thrive well in an indoor location. 65 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit, or that's about 18 to 27 degrees Celsius is ideal. So that fits nicely with the temperatures that most of us keep our homes at for most of the year. Fertilising, not a huge priority for a Flaming Katy houseplant. Generally 2 to 3 times per year is more than enough times to fertilise it. You could maybe increase that up to once a month, but any more than that and you could run into problems with nutrient toxicity and just build up of nutrients in the soil. So err on the side of caution there as well. Flaming Katys do bloom profusely for months at a time, but there's a few wee tricks that you can use to make it bloom for even longer. So as you can see, this plant, it's still getting started. It's the end of January currently, and there's an awful lot of buds waiting to break out. So I'm looking forward to them flowering. But even at this stage, we can see there are possibly a few. You can maybe just see there. There's a wee bloom that is finished, and you can either pinch these off or cut them off, and it'll actually encourage the plant to produce new buds and further blooms. So you just go around and you can either pinch them off, or ideally you should probably cut them off because it just provides a slightly cleaner cut. And you're less likely to introduce disease. But as you can see, you want to take off the dead blooms, the spent blooms, and this will encourage more buds, more flowers, and you can sometimes keep these flowering for 3, 4, 5 months if you're lucky. So another thing to watch out actually is quite often Flaming Katys can become a little bit leggy, so they do like bright light, and we can rarely provide them with as much light as they would ideally like, so they will tend to stretch towards the light. They'll become leggy. And a good tip, usually once it's finished flowering, is to pinch them back, to trim it back, to prune it back quite aggressively, to try and keep this nice compact shape, which I think most people prefer the look of. So just going into slightly more detail. How big do they grow is a good question. A lot of Flaming Katies are sold as small tabletop or windowsill plants. They're usually dwarf varieties that don't grow to more than 8, 6 to 8, maybe up to 12 inches in height. In the wild, the natural variety will grow up to 20 inches in height, but overall they are quite small. And in terms of their spread, it's around about the same as their height. So the dwarf varieties will typically spread to 8 to 12 inches. Light, as I said, indirect sunlight is best. Avoid more than 1 to 2 hours of direct sunlight per day. An east or west facing windowsill is ideal. Windowsills in particular are good because that's where they're going to get the most amount of light. If you're putting them further into a room or in a dark location, you're probably going to run into problems just with them becoming quite leggy or perhaps not producing as many blooms as you were expecting. Moving on then, watering, I think we've covered. Just infrequent watering, wait till the top half of the soil is dry. I suppose another thing is don't water over the top of the plant, and that's a good tip. If you water over the top of the plant, because the foliage is so dense, quite often what will happen is that the water will pool in between the leaves, and in most indoor spaces, it's relatively cool. Airflow isn't ideal, and therefore evaporation is very slow. So you get these pools of water that will stay for a long time, and this can introduce fungal and bacterial diseases. So generally, just get your watering can and water around the side. Interestingly, the way I have this set up here, I don't have it planted directly in this plant pot. I've got it planted in an inner pot, and the idea behind that is I've got this inner pot with plenty of drainage holes. So when I'm watering this, I'll actually just take it out of the inner pot, take it over to the sink, and run some water through the pot until it drains out the bottom, and then I'll maybe leave it for a minute or two in the sink to let the excess water drain off before putting it back in its pot. And I actually have this pot set up with I've actually got some old tiles at the bottom of this outer pot, and the reason I've done that is just to raise the inner pot up slightly so that if there is more water draining out of the bottom of this pot after I've watered it, that it doesn't sit in a puddle of water for a period of time. So it raises up, any water that drips out falls to the bottom of the pot, and it doesn't cause any problems. Okay, so moving on. Oh yes, humidity. Flaming Katy, being a succulent plant, it's not overly fussy about humidity levels. Ideally, sort of 40 to 60% humidity is probably ideal, although it will tolerate a variety of humidity levels. Probably actually a more arid environment is better for this plant because it reduces your risk of fungal and bacterial diseases, and the plant will tolerate low humidity levels very, very well. Soil, you want to make sure your soil's well draining. You could, in terms of potting this one up, I think I just potted this up with a combination of just standard potting soil 50% and 50% cactus mix. Now that's a slightly lazy way of doing it, but it was convenient for me, and that just produces a faster draining potting mix for this plant. Alternatively, equal mixes, an equal composition of perlite, coarse sand, and potting compost would be ideal, because then you're getting a nice fast draining soil but plenty of organic material in there as well. Pruning, Flaming Katy, dead easy. They tolerate pruning really, really well. Generally, I don't prune it much while it's flowering. All I do is make sure that I'm deadheading, every week or so to keep it flowering as long as possible. Once the flowers have gone, I will prune it back really quite aggressively. I'll certainly take a third to half of the foliage off, and you just want to take it off down to a pair of leaves. So take the stems off, down to a suitable pair of leaves, and then you can leave it to grow over the summer, produce new leaves and strengthen up its root system in preparation for the next blooming cycle. Propagating Flaming Katy, much like other succulent plants, it's really, really easy. Best way to do it is a stem cutting, although you can propagate leaf cuttings. A leaf cutting, literally all you would do is just prepare a propagation tray, cut a leaf off at the base with a clean, sterile scalpel or some scissors, and you can actually just place the leaves on the propagation tray. But the better way of doing it is to do a stem cutting. So you just want to take a stem off, with maybe say 2 or 3 pairs of leaves. Then you want to make sure that your stem cutting, there's a good 2 to 3 inches of plain stem at the bottom. If there's a pair of leaves right near the bottom, take them off. Prepare your propagation tray, make a hole for it. You don't even really need to use any rooting hormone because these being succulent plants, they do tend to propagate really well. So I would just do my stem cutting, pop it in a wee pre-prepared hole in a propagation tray, put a lid over the top of the transparent lid over the top of the propagation tray, and just lightly mist it. Every 1 to 2 days, and within 3 or 4 weeks, there should be good root generation, and within 4 to 6 weeks, you can pop them up individually. A plant like this could produce loads of stem cuttings, so you're never going to run out of plants. And if any of your friends want a Flaming Katy, it might be a good wee project to propagate a few stem cuttings. Okay, a lot of people buy Kalanchoe Blossfeldiana as an annual plant. They buy it in the winter, enjoy the blooms, and then throw it out. But it's not an annual. It's a perennial plant. It'll come back year after year, and it's fairly easy to get it to rebloom. A lot of people think it's difficult. It's not difficult, you just need to follow specific instructions. Kalanchoe Blossfeldiana is a short day plant, so it requires short days, or more specifically, long nights for a period of time to stimulate new bud and bloom development. So coming into September, October, November, whenever the nights are getting longer, you want to make sure that your Kalanchoe Blossfeldiana gets at least 6 or 8 weeks where it gets 12 hours of complete darkness per night, at least 12 hours of complete darkness per night. Where some people go wrong is electric light does affect this. So if you maybe are keeping this in your kitchen or your living room, where it's dark outside, but you're putting the electric lights on, that that won't count as dark time to the plant. You need to put it in a completely dark room, from say 6 or 7 p.m. to 7 or 8 a.m. the next morning. This plant in particular, whilst I'll enjoy the blooms, during the flowering season, when it comes to trying to get it to rebloom, I will put this in a spare bedroom, somewhere that people aren't going to be coming in and out of in the evening time. So literally when it's dark outside, it'll be dark in this spare bedroom, and it'll get at least 12 hours of darkness per night. Once you've given your plant about 6 or 8 weeks of complete darkness for at least 12 hours per day, it should be well into the blooming cycle. You should start to see buds developing, and you can start to look forward to another round of blooms. I think that's probably all I want to cover in this video. I've got a lot more detail over on my blog article on smartgardenguide.com, so I'd love you to come over and have a read at it. If you've got any questions about caring for Blossfeldiana or Kalanchoe Blossfeldiana, I'd love to hear them, so please make a comment below. And again, if you like this video, press the like button, and I'd love you to subscribe to the channel. Many thanks for watching, and until the next video, bye.